small business and thriving economies, the opportunities and optimism micro-businesses bring to local economies, sponsored by GoDaddy. Please welcome your moderator for today's discussion, Alex Rosen.
There we go. Good afternoon. Happy first panel after lunch. Thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here with you and honored to be joined by the esteemed Mayor Cantrell of New Orleans and Mayor Bibb of Cleveland. We are going to be talking about small businesses and thriving economies. And this is very timely because small businesses, and in particular, micro businesses, are really essential when we talk about inclusive growth. Before I bring up the mayors and invite them to the panel, if it's all right with you, I'd like to share a couple data points and set the stage. All right. So I'm going to start with a number, 20 million. I am Alex Rosen from GoDaddy Venture Forward, and we are a research initiative started by GoDaddy in 2018 to look at over 20 million micro businesses across the United States. When we say micro business, we mean predominantly people who have less than 10 employees and a digital presence, like a website. These businesses are everywhere, and we look at them geographically, as well as trying to understand who they are, because oftentimes they are too new or too small to show up in traditional government statistics, but yet they are a really important driving force of the local economies. So a little bit about their growth. As you can see, that 20 million number has continued to grow. This is looking at the last 3 years. And you could see how, whether it's economic upturns we've seen historically, or more recently, some economic challenges, people turn to these digital presences. We could see how also federal and local stimulus really offers the opportunity for people to take advantage and build an online presence. Probably most of us know or are a micro business owner. Probably whether it is your favorite bakery, mom and pop that sells online, someone who consults online, whether it's a side hustle. It is all around us, and that is why we are dedicated to bringing this to light. So going into why they're so important and what their impact is. Micro businesses have 3 major economic impacts that we've found by partnering with economists and political scientists. They drive up annual household income gains by almost $200 when you add 1 per 100 people to a community. They drive down unemployment by 0.05 percentage points when you add 1 per 100 people in a community. And for every 1 micro-business entrepreneur, there are at least 2 jobs created in that community because they are either hiring, they are growing, or they are just bringing more income into the community and spending more, therefore creating jobs. Who are they? So I already mentioned that most of them have less than 10 employees, fewer than 10 employees. Most of them also need less than $5,000 to get started. They're extremely agile and resilient. And you can see here, 2 out of 3 need less than 5K, and that is whether they are online only or sometimes even brick and mortar. As far as do these businesses bring in money, do they turn to them for revenue? Yes. Many look to them as a primary source of income, with more having it as supplemental, but when we surveyed them at the end of February, just a month and a half ago, it was overwhelming response that they want this supplemental to become their main source of income. So why is it important to support them? Because micro businesses help close opportunity gaps. We've seen a great shift since before the pandemic in 2020 to since in terms of who is participating economically through these digital micro businesses. Women now account for more than half of micro businesses. Black entrepreneurs have grown in participation, and Black women in particular are the fastest growing segment of microbusiness starts since the pandemic. Also, people under 30 turn to them as well and have grown at an increasing rate because it is easy to get started. So speaking of opportunity, what is the opportunity they bring? A lot of them are businesses of opportunity, meaning that they were employed when they started. That means that this is a choice that people are making. This is a mindset in terms of betting on oneself and already being employed, but choosing to be either their own boss, to pursue a passion, to have more flexibility in time. These microbusinesses offer opportunity. That is why we call them, that category is microbusiness of opportunity. The ones out of necessity are also equally important and grown a little bit during the pandemic, is the ones who are turned to because otherwise they don't have a source of income. They are either not working due to disability, retirement, parenting, or being furloughed. Now let's talk about the optimism. There's so much excitement that when we look at 7 out of 10 micro-business owners say that when they look out at the next 6 months, they believe it's going to be more positive. However, only 3 out of 10 feel that same way about the greater economy, whether state or national. When we look at Black entrepreneurs in particular, that optimism is even stronger and more inspiring. It is closer to 9 out of 10 believe in their business and are pursuing this opportunity, but about only 5 out of 10 feel that way about the economy. This is amazing insight about the way people are choosing to take their future in their hands, about thinking of the American dream and making a better life for oneself, for one's kids, that this is offering that avenue. So a little bit, let me go back. So I'll stop talking and share a little bit of a video, and then we're gonna get into the panel.
Policymakers have long known microbusinesses have an outsized impact on their communities, but they've never had access to real data on 20 million microbusinesses at a local level until Venture Forward. GoDaddy partnered with UCLA Anderson Forecast, University of Iowa, and Arizona State University to quantitatively measure the impact of these businesses. For every one microbusiness per 100 people in a community, 2 new jobs are created, not including the business owner. Median household income rises over a year period, and employment drops by 0.5%. Our mission is to empower these business owners and to provide city leaders with the information they need to create the policies and programs supporting entrepreneurship in their communities. Who are these entrepreneurs? They're everyone. More than half of them get started with less than $5,000. These microbusinesses are being started by people from every walk of life across diverse racial and economic backgrounds and lift their entire communities. Historically underrepresented groups like women and Black entrepreneurs are jumping in at an even higher rate. The freedom to start a business with minimal investment empowers everyone with a dream. It's all here in the data. Go ahead and take a look.
So all of this data that I spoke to, both geographic and survey, is available for free for download on our website. You can also reach out to me directly or ventureforward@godaddy.com if you're interested in more detail. So with that, I'd like to invite up Mayor Bibb and Mayor Cantrell to join me for a panel chat. Thank you. You too.
Thank you for everything.
So one slide I put up for those in the audience is a look at the micro businesses throughout these 2 amazing cities. And the lightest color is where there's the most concentration, and darkest is where there's less. So on stage with me, there's over 60,000 micro businesses represented. So, Mayor Cantrell, Mayor Bibb, you are both innovative leaders at the forefront of a lot of change happening in your respective cities. Can you share some insight on the state of your city's economy, both in terms of the momentum and some of the challenges you're facing?
Well, I'll start. You know, one of the unique things about Cleveland is we have a strong heritage in manufacturing and really leading the Industrial Revolution at the height of the Industrial Revolution. You may not know this, but the world's first billionaire was born and died in Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow.
John D. Rockefeller. And he's buried in our city right now. And so my city powered the world's first industrial revolution. And now with President Biden's policies where we're gonna start making chips in America again, Intel's coming to our state. Now, our city might not be able to get an Intel, but we have thousands of acres of land to supply the entire supply chain of Intel, of the Cleveland Clinic, of Sherwin-Williams. And so we're really focused on how do we take advantage of this new moment in the American economy. As we're building things in America again, let's build them in Cleveland, Ohio, get the workforce trained to do that, and be aggressive in attracting and retaining those companies.
Amazing.
Thank you so much again for having us. It's always good to be on a panel with my brother, Mayor. We seem to do this often. But the city of New Orleans, you know that we are, primary industry has been hospitality, definitely rooted in culture, and understanding that culture is our economy as well. And so when you think about innovation and creativity, it happens in our city. We know that we were very hit hard, disproportionately, with COVID-19 because of the reliance on that one industry. So diversifying our economy has been the top priority, focusing on tech, bioscience and innovation, of course, advanced manufacturing, renewable energy platforms, to say that. But we've also seen, though, the bounce back of our economy in hospitality. We have been able to, demonstrate that we hosted a Mardi Gras, bringing in hundreds of thousands. We recently had the Miss Universe pageant in our city as well. Essence Fest has come back. We had the NCAA Final Four. So we do see tourism coming back stronger and faster, which is a great thing. Film is another production. We are fourth in the country for production. We were able to remain steady even during COVID-19 with film. We grossed over $881 million in production, which surpassed any other year in our history. So wanting to double down on that as well. But again, it goes to tech. We have really demonstrated that New Orleans is a place that you can start and scale. We saw receipts over $2 billion. We had a company unicorn, again, start and scale in our city. And so we're fourth in the country for women in technology. And so we're just wanting to put resources in these industries, bioscience as well. We had one of our, Dr. Trivia Frazier, who started Obatala Sciences. Again, her receipts grossed $3 billion. And so we're just wanting to, again, hone in on what's happening and focus and leverage these resources. Our economy was able to get a real shot in the arm by the ARPA dollars. And it was this organization, AAMA, who played a major role in focusing on and advocating for a direct allocation. And I don't know where the city of New Orleans would be without that direct allocation, because it is allowing us to invest in our entrepreneurs, our creatives, in ways that we have never done before. So the best is yet to come, and the data that you are showing, thank you for partnering with us last year. Absolutely. Because that's going to allow us what's necessary to push more resources, dollars, to meet our people where they are, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and advancing growth. And as you mentioned, just filling those gaps for our people.
Absolutely. I feel like we need to clap after that.
I need my invite to Essence, Madam Mayor.
It's coming.
All right.
You both mentioned technology as you think about your local economies. Obviously, we're all thinking about technology. And the pandemic saw a large pivot to e-commerce and businesses coming online. Our research has shown it's not just about the availability of broadband, but it's the utilization of it. It is how it's put to use that makes a difference. Connectivity helps businesses pivot, communicate, and expand. You've each led important programs and innovatively applying the use of technology unique to the culture of your cities. Can you share a little bit more about that, about those programs? And I know Mayor Cantrell, you shared last year about the online training, for example, of hospitality workers to online sales. Maybe we start with you.
Well, it's that transferable experience. You know, one of the things with our industry being hit the hardest, folks were like, what am I going to do? And we were able to infuse resources and programming to help train our hospitality industry, our workers, to tech sales and teaching them that, you know, pitching that dessert or that specialty drink or, you know, how they do, sell that entree, that those skills are transferable to tech sales. And we were able to start piloting this type of training. We started with 10 individuals. The training was 12 weeks, and they were able to get jobs immediately, $85,000 to $95,000 a year. And so using that as a focal point and growing those pilot programs. And so now we have people that are not returning to hospitality. And this is also contributing to the workforce, particularly the capacity. Most of our folks, they say, oh, they're not working. They just don't want to. No, they are working. They're just not coming back to hospitality because they've been shown how their skills are transferable, and it can put them on a greater path to transferable wealth. And so this is where we're putting in more dollars. ARPA dollars are helping us, again, just go into there, meet people where they are and showing them. And in our environment, sometimes you have to be even more creative because, and oftentimes, our people kind of count themselves out. They don't see that the program is for them. So you really have to go to them, not kind of turn the map around. No, don't come to us,
Right.
But you go into those communities. You be very intentional about how you touch them and work them through the process, hand holding them through the process. And then you know what? They're bringing other people along.
Yeah.
Well, in Cleveland, there were a couple of structural barriers that we confronted when I took office last year. In 2020, our city was ranked the least connected city in the United States in terms of access to high-speed broadband, the least connected. And we all recognized that during the COVID-19 pandemic. We realized that broadband was not a luxury. It was a basic economic right to be a productive member of the economy. And so since the federal investments through the ACP program, we've been connecting families to high-speed broadband. Over the next couple of months, we're going to make a major announcement about a multi-million-dollar investment that will be leveraged to not only connect our families to high-speed broadband, but make an early down payment to put fiber in our city as well, too. And parts of the city that have been historically digitally redlined. So we need to address the connectivity issue in our city. Secondly, I want to talk for a bit about digital literacy for Black and brown businesses. During the pandemic, I was leading a nonprofit, and we went to the neighborhood I was born and raised in, the southeast side of Cleveland. And in a strip of a commercial corridor, we saw historic Black-owned businesses who didn't have email. Some, if they did have email, were still using AOL, didn't know how to create an e-commerce platform. So think if you're a historic restaurant, and the only way for you to stay in business now is to do Uber Eats or DoorDash. They had no digital literacy to say, how do we get our business online? And so one thing we're trying to do is figure out what are the right programs and training initiatives to get these Black and brown-owned Main Street businesses to be digital ready to compete in the economy now. And that's a big part of our Southeast investment strategy for our city. I think the other thing I want to talk about is this scary trend that I'm terrified of, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we need to figure out how to start training the next generation of students in this technology, particularly in our communities. Because if we don't, we're going to get wiped out. And these aren't just blue-collar jobs that are getting wiped out. These are white-collar jobs now, like a first-year associate at a law firm jobs. And so we've already started to do pipeline of programs around this. A couple weeks ago, we announced that we have the second in the country quantum computer in our city at the Cleveland Clinic at IBM. And we have started a pipeline training program with high school students to do quantum computing in our city. That's the future. So we as mayors have to take a leading role to get ahead of these trends and really think about where the puck is going so we can be prepared for this next generation and where technology is moving forward.
Absolutely. I think for us at GoDaddy and me personally, it's such an honor and so exciting to be speaking with mayors because I know I mentioned in the first question you're at the forefront, but you truly are just on the front lines and seeing what's happening and able to act the fastest. It's not a trickle down, it is a direct impact that you can make. And so it's such an honor to share the data with you and see and hear how each of you applies it for the betterment of your communities. So building back to low tech, away from high tech. One of the things, I'm gonna jump ahead to, as we were talking about Black and brown businesses. I'm gonna put a slide up for everyone to see about the unique attributes of Black-owned microbusinesses. What we see is that Black women, in particular, tend to be farther along in the registration process with an EIN, have started more recently than the entire sample, and be more ambitious in terms of, so we spoke about the unicorn that came out of New Orleans. In Cleveland, we saw in that last slide just how much growth there is, and you saw that sharp line after the ARPA funds. Let me share a couple pieces of information unique, because this is national, to Cleveland and New Orleans. So since the pandemic, Black-owned microbusinesses grew from 14% to 20% of all microbusinesses. In Cleveland, that number is double, at 39% of post-pandemic starts being Black-owned businesses. And in New Orleans, Black-owned microbusinesses are half of all new starts, so even higher. Black entrepreneurs, as seen here, and as well as in Cleveland, New Orleans, tend to be more ambitious in the long term, optimistic in the short term, farther along in their paperwork, but more likely to be online only and to rely on their microbusiness for supplemental income. At this time, while the desire is there for it to be main source, it still oftentimes continues to be a side hustle. With a large Black and brown constituency in each of your cities, how does this information reflect or complement what you've seen? And can you talk a little bit more about the digital divide? I know you already touched on it, but if there's more you'd like to add.
Sure. Well, one of the things in New Orleans, absolutely, the digital divide is real. 44% of our young people even, disconnected. We embarked upon our digital equity plan, and looking at the research in 2018, and that completed in 2019, so well before the pandemic. So we had already started to invest heavily in the areas where the divide existed the most, where the gaps were. Even with connecting, of course, with connectivity, but also with equipment, with having the devices and setting up and being very creative at libraries, for example, where in all neighborhoods where residents can go in and have access to equipment, but also get their things repaired. But that was only the start. So clearly when COVID-19 hit, it rocked our community, no doubt. But allowing us to, one, tap into some of the PPP dollars. In addition to the ARPA dollars, we've been able to infuse millions in this area of growth. But also as it relates to the creatives, you talked about the micro businesses. Well, culture, as I mentioned, is a part of our economy, but our creatives really needed a little infusion of the dollar, because they were already kind of trending up, whether they were, selling their merchandise or, we do masking, we do beading, of course, visual arts and the like. And so with government able to kind of reach out with the dollar has helped them to expand in ways that they haven't seen before. But even prior to the pandemic, the city of New Orleans, I had to lead an effort at the state to change our structure, our taxing structure, based off the taxes that are generated in our city, with the majority of them staying in Baton Rouge, the state of Louisiana. So we restructured the tax base, which allowed us to, one, utilize those dollars going directly into our culture instead of marketing our culture, I would say pimping our people, that we have now used that dollar to investing in our people, and it's unprecedented. And so now we have our creatives trusting government. Initially, they were like, is this money really going to come to us?
Right.
But last year alone, we put in over $5 million that went directly into our industry, directly to the people. So now we're getting more applications than we've ever seen before because it's real. And this is allowing them not only to start, but to scale. And I don't believe that this is going to slow down at all. In addition to that, we did a disparity study even prior to COVID. Small businesses in the city make up 50%. But that disparity study showed us that in the receipts, they made up 2% disparity. But that allowed us to put dollars where we know they were needed the most and kind of turn the map around. So I did a reverse trade show, for example. I debundled contracts and made sure that the small businesses are able to bid on the work as primes. And so now we have the small or the subs are now the prime, and the individuals that used to be the large contractor community that used to be the prime are now participating as subs. So we've kind of turned it around. And again, initially, our community didn't think that this was going to be real. But now they're seeing that the subs are driving the economy, and the larger firms are participating, but it's where the rubber meets the road. It's the people who need the resources the most, that are in your community, that are not going anywhere. They're part of the fabric of the city. And that's how we're going to grow and make sure that our people are connected with transferable wealth opportunities. And again, we had some pushback from your larger contractors, on the front end, or even the minority contractors that would always get the shake. But it's like the handful. So you piss some people off, and then it was some of your black and brown, but you gotta spread the love around.
Right.
And so now that's happening. So again, I think and I know that we're moving in the right direction.
That's so smart.
Spread love is the Brooklyn way, right?
It is.
I want to spend a couple minutes diving deep on this notion of what's happening in Cleveland as it relates to black women entrepreneurship. In 2020, we were ranked by City Lab magazine as the worst city in America for black women. On every outcome, from education to economics to health disparities. This was before the pandemic. Then the pandemic happens. And I think you see a couple things in the economy. First and foremost, women, in particular black women, now have a decision to make in terms of, can I afford to go back to work, while also thinking about childcare when schools are closed and daycare facilities are closed. And inherently, as a proud son of a single black women are the most entrepreneurial people in the economy in this country. And I realize inherently what we're seeing across the country is that COVID created this massive disruption to say it's time for black female entrepreneurs to leverage and maximize this moment. And I think that's what speaks to this rise in the number of black women-owned micro businesses in Cleveland. And not just in parts of the economy where historically you see black women thriving, in the hospitality sector and the hair and beauty sector, but we're seeing it in construction now. We're seeing it in technology and marketing, in the cannabis industry in our state. And as Mayor Cantrell spoke to, now I need to figure out, how do I remove those structural barriers that have undermined the ability of black women to succeed in the business economy? So for example, we had a rule on our books in Cleveland that you have to show you've been in business for a year to get a contract. Or outdated bonding requirements, which are inherently racist when you have an insurance system in this economy that is racist. And so we are examining those things in our procurement department to say, what are these structural barriers that are undermining the ability of minority-owned companies to grow and thrive in our city. I would also say this. Both Mayor Cantrell and I are students of the Maynard Jackson School of City Government. We don't get that next generation of black and brown millionaires if we don't do it from our perch at City Hall. And for a long time in my city, that was not a part of how we did business. And so we believe that coming out of this pandemic, we have a unique opportunity to rebuild our economy, but do it with black women leading the way.
Wow.
Yep. And even to that, Bibbs, when you talk about, of course, black women, and in these industries that are, focusing on diversifying, we're seeing it heavily as it relates to infrastructure, green infrastructure particularly. And so a lot of workforce development dollars pumping in millions for training opportunities, because we are spending billions on green infrastructure and just gray as well, but in green. We're on the front lines of climate change, and these are jobs of the future, which are jobs right now. And so you have to train folks to maintain the infrastructure improvements that you're making. And we're just seeing more women stepping up in these industries. And it is remarkable. It really is. And so, you know what? I know, the way is in our front, but we cannot, now is not the time to let up in terms of how we are providing our people with these opportunities for growth.
Absolutely. I love that. Jobs of the future are the jobs of now. One thing, Mayor Bibb, I have heard you say is that progress moves at the speed of trust. And it seems like what Mayor Cantrell described exactly addresses why she's seen so much progress in New Orleans as well, building that trust.
People have to see it, but you know what? You have to touch them. You really have to go where they are in order to build it. Because I cannot overemphasize, sometimes, our folks don't believe it's for them.
Right.
And it is specifically for them.
Right. And I think for us, when we look at the data and we see that so many people start out of, out of their living room, these businesses, it is partially for that. It's because they didn't have to go anywhere. That the ones who have the mindset and already have that confidence and optimism, they have the tools at home and are able to go. But there is also a lot of people who have been the most economically left out and don't have that mindset and need a reminder and need it to be as easy as possible and to have that reach out that it sounds like both of you are doing in your cities.
And I think what we need to do a better job of in the political side is making the business case for closing the racial wealth gap in this country. McKinsey did a study, and it said that the fact that we have this racial wealth gap is costing our economy trillions of dollars of lost GDP. And as you see the demographics change, we are seeing the tanning of America, the tanning of the world. If we don't find a way to uplift our communities to be at the driver's seat of the global economy, then America is going to be at risk. And we haven't had a good debate about what that means.
Right.
Because the next Steve Jobs ain't going to be a white guy in a black turtleneck.
Right.
It's going to come from our neighborhoods. Right? And we need to make sure we're building those pipelines and those pathways for that to happen.
Right.
And even when you think about, I talk about the cultural community in New Orleans, there was a time where they would create, but it wouldn't go anywhere, meaning someone else would benefit from their work, whether it's snapping a picture of one of our Mardi Gras Indians, right? But the Indian would never get the return, but it's them.
Right.
It's their product. But we've changed that game. Now they're the ones, and the micro businesses allows them to sell their own products, to reap the benefits of their own instead of someone else. And it's a game changer.
Absolutely. One of the things I'd read about is around community-based advancement, that it's not about disrupting the community. To your point of culture is an economic asset, that it's not about someone commercializing it. It's not about changing a community, the demographics, or it's allowing that community to scale and meet the audience, meet the customers who want those products and have that ownership. As mentioned with businesses of opportunities and what you see on this slide, number one reason across anybody for years, we've looked since 2019, to start a micro business is to be your own boss. It is that sense of ownership. And The other is flexibility of time and achieving more success on one's own. Just curious, how you've mentioned that, how that aligns with what you've observed of shifting trends, but talking a little bit more about that ownership and mindset and how you can help further make it easier to access capital and help with marketing to get started.
Well, one is providing them with the money. They need the money. They need the direct infusion of cash. And so we have been able to activate these I don't know where, I'm going back, I don't know where we would be without that direct allocation, because it gives us the flexibility that we do need to get the cash into our people's hands so that they can not only start, but they can scale. And then when you layer that, as my brother Mayor mentioned, just in terms of other ways that you can help, for example, with childcare, with early learning seats, all these things are force multipliers to help that business owner succeed. If they have a place where that young child can get early childhood education, it matters. And so for the first time, in our history now with our city, we passed a millage where our young people, 0 to 3, you get a seat.
Wow.
That's unprecedented, and it's a 20-year millage. And it also speaks to facilities. And these are black and brown children who need this, families, parents that need this. But this is going to allow them to focus on building their business, scaling up. And so it's a force multiplier.
I think we're seeing a trend now where the first part of the civil rights movement was we need to integrate the lunch counter.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. Then we need to have access to the voting box. We got that. Then you have this moment where we want to be on corporate boards and be employees of large corporations. And then we quickly found out that, does that really move the needle for our community?
Mm-hmm.
And it really doesn't until you have ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of saying, I want to be an employee at the bakery, let's own the bakery 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if I'm the CEO of my own company, I can hire a black lawyer, a black accountant, black employees, and I can not only build back my block, but buy the whole block at the same time.
That's right.
And create scale. And I think that's where you're seeing this new rise of black entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And it must be something we be more aggressive about in our cities to create that right ecosystem for that to prosper long term.
And it's being unapologetic about it.
Exactly.
Because you see where when I'm going to hire someone who looks like me.
Yeah.
And then you get in our community, sometimes we second guess that.
Yeah.
We're the first ones to second guess it.
Yeah.
When it doesn't happen on the other side, they don't think twice.
Mm-hmm.
But now I have to think about optics.
Right.
Wait a minute. I'm thinking about the optics in the community that I serve,
Right.
that is 59% African American.
It's a whole extra challenge.
Yes.
And as Governor Moore mentioned this morning, because you have a premium on equity doesn't mean you're undermining excellence.
Right.
Equity is excellence. And we need to make sure we're always talking about that.
Love it. I could talk to you both for days. This is amazing. I know we only have a few minutes, so I want to open it up to questions. We have a mic in the audience. Does anyone have a question?
Good afternoon. Love this conversation. And I actually was a micro business, and Mayor Cantrell, one of my good friends, Savitra Wilson, who comes from your city, we are one of about 100 Black women who have ever raised more than $1 million in venture capital. And it's really hard for Black women to get to that step. So I started off as, thank you.
We need a pause
It's
and
good
clap
and
for
bad.
that. Amazing.
And it's good, but it's bad because, we only get less than 1% of all venture capital funding. So it's something to celebrate, but also a big
Right.
concern because I started off as a micro business and then my business started to scale. And thus I needed to hire more people. I needed money to provide them with benefits and a winning salary to be able to recruit. So I'm just trying to think, how can cities be more fruitful to business owners that are starting to scale, that get past that micro level, where maybe we don't have to go after venture capital and the city can almost be a partner. I'm actually in Atlanta, work really closely with Mayor Dickens and sit on several task force there, but had a big hurdle going from 10 employees to now 100 employees, and it's continuously hard, and it never gets easier. So I love that you were mentioning about the subprime and prime opportunities, but just to those business leaders in here, it's really hard for us to even get the customers, and then it's hard to get the funding. So as you scale past that small business, which I could guarantee you every woman-owned business wants to do. I mean, they don't want to stay small forever. If they could become a multi-million-dollar business, that's the dream, and it has a big play on closing the wealth gap. The more Black women millionaires that can be created, we're the leaders of our households, and it's just really hard to get past that 10 employees and stay there. So just any feedback would be great.
I think, well, in New Orleans and what we were able to do with some of the ARPA dollars as well, but also with bond sale, but creating an economic development fund so that we can help, because you can start, but it's that sweet spot that you need, that infusion to get over the hump to therefore grow. And so through our economic development office, again, this is where we're going to utilize this fund to really help our small businesses get over the hump so that they can scale at record numbers.
I would say real quick, one, we should be an early stage funder if the state rules allow us to do that. Certain states have restrictions on assets cities can invest in. Two, we should be a customer, depending on what the company is. But then thirdly, one of the biggest powers we have as mayor is the power of collaboration and convening and putting the right people in the room under the auspices of the mayor's office to say, invest in this VC firm, invest in these companies. Here's a value proposition of why you should do that.
That's right. And creating those tables like you're mentioning, because that hand holding is necessary, and just walking with them each step in each stage. And when government does that, it really has a way of holding the business community accountable as well. Because if I'm not letting you go, then like, where are you going? You know, and so I think that builds trust and it builds credibility as well.
One more question over here.
Thank you. Keith James, I'm mayor of West Palm Beach, Florida. I like the focus of this panel on micro businesses. There's a lot of conversation about small businesses, but I think the real sweet spot, certainly I found it in my city, is working with these micro businesses. And I think there's some statistics, maybe GoDaddy had them, that access to capital, these micro businesses don't need a lot of money.
Right.
They don't.
$5,000.
Yeah.
And it's usually amounts that banks don't typically lend. So I just wanted to talk about, and I've got my own program, but this is a question, believe me, for the mayors, is how are you addressing, one, access to capital for the micro businesses, and then two, training and knowledge. We know about the Black women and the communities, everybody got a side hustle. How do we teach them how to make that side hustle a viable business? So what are you doing in terms of providing training in those areas and access to capital?
Real quick, we have two partnerships with, one with the Urban League and one with our local EDIC facility in Cleveland. Secondly, we don't have an established access to capital loan fund quite yet for micro businesses. We did start with ARPA, a $5 million access to capital fund for minority development firms to do home rehab and development in our city. But I think that's a model we could potentially scale for micro companies long term.
So we created the New Orleans Cultural and Tourism Fund specifically for our creatives. And that allows them, it really creates the access to that small amount, and it has been phenomenal. And it's also shown, again, that cultural community, that it's a real thing. So whether, I mentioned, our Mardi Gras Indians and the like, but even the food sector, all of this is a part of our culture, which is driving our economy. So the more that we focus there, I know the greater that it will allow these businesses not only to start, but to scale. We had 19 million visitors coming to the city of New Orleans pre-pandemic, and we're seeing those numbers come back now. And as I tell my folks, there's a shame on us if we don't have more black folk tapped into those visitors coming, making their money off of them. Because now, while we want to diversify our economy, of course, but you also want to play to your strengths. So if you know that we don't even have to market New Orleans, people will come on their own. But the thing is, we need more black and brown folks with the legitimate businesses so that they can get their fair share of these people coming to their city. And so we see that this infusion, it's working. But then also working with our CDFI community, working with our universities and colleges, our Delgado, our community college as well, putting millions in workforce development and training opportunities. And again, just going to where the people are. But also we have now moved our workforce development office really in the neighborhood, in Central City, for example. It's one of our black communities historically. But it's now in an old school, historic building. You go in there, the lighting, the feel, the environment matters. And so now we're seeing more of our people coming to it because they see themselves in it, and it's not intimidating. So kind of creating the environment as well as providing the resources and tools. But that hand-holding is also essential because it builds the trust. And once you have that, it's almost like the sky is the limit because the light bulb goes off and people feel like, wow, I'm a part of this growth. And then it's remarkable because they're bringing other people along. They're the ambassadors of the program. So that's when you know it's working. When they're the ones bringing other people along, getting them engaged in the program. But I'm gonna also say this, because of the growth of the micro businesses, which are great, and we're wanting to continue to, enhance that. But we're also seeing the capacity loss, I would say, in city government. We have vacancies galore.
Oh, yeah, that's facts.
And so this has changed the dynamic in terms of the workplace, I think, for good. Yeah. So the challenge is for me and my city is to figure out ways that we can get people even to work for city government now. Yeah. And also whether they can also man their business, but also work for city government. I'm looking at, opportunities like that.
Yeah, win-win.
I mean, win-win.
Absolutely.
Because people aren't going into government for decades now, for generations. They say, to hell with that pension. They are, because they're seeing that their skills are transferable.
Right.
Resources are available, and they can scale and grow.
Right.
And they're saying, you know what? Hey, I'm out of here.
Right. Well, we live in a very exciting time where people reevaluated their opportunities with the disruption of COVID. They started choosing themselves. You are two very admirable mayors who are continuing to navigate all this disruption just beautifully. Thank you so much for your time and everything you've shared today.